Rayon was once a fierce assassin for House Robert until Darius took him out. But Rayon wasn't about to roll over. He begged for revenge and came back as a member of House Sieghart, the most badass noble house around. He'll need all their nearly limitless resources to settle the score. He's got the wicked flame link technique up his sleeve, but he's also cursed with bitter frost, which is slowly freezing him from the inside out. And if that wasn't enough, a fiery demon of wrath is gunning to take over his body. It all begins with our protagonist, Rayon, kneeling before Darius Robert. Darius told Rayon that he had done good work. We then discover that Rayon was prophesied to die at the hands of Darius on that day. Darius told Rayon that it was thanks to him that his house had started growing even faster than before. Rayon explained that he only did what he was asked to. This sparked a thought in Darius' mind as he asked Rayon if he thought that shadows should have freedom, leading Rayon to respond that shadows' only job is to obey their masters, and they need neither thought, emotions, nor a heart. Although these answers were right, Darius wasted no time realizing what was happening. He questioned Rayon as to why he acted independently and broke out of his indoctrination. This left Rayon begin to panic. Turned out that the way House Robert utilized the assassination group called Shadow was by kidnapping or buying young children. They then turned these bought children into assassins who would dedicate their entire lives to doing House Robert's dirty work. Just like everyone else, Rayon was indoctrinated as well, but due to a special encounter during one of his missions, Rayon could break free of the awful leash he had bound to him. However, Rayon didn't have any idea how Darius was able to find out that he broke free from his indoctrination. Darius then explained to Rayon that he and every other assassin have two collars. The first one was the indoctrination, and to describe the second one, Darius began to manipulate the rage worms that he installed inside Rayon. All of a sudden, Rayon began to feel immense pain in his stomach. Rayon wasted no time calling Darius out for acting righteous all along. However, Darius explained that he was right in doing what he did since Rayon did indeed break through the indoctrination. All his life, Rayon did the dirty work for Robert's family, but now that he had found a way to freely live his life was coming to an end. He did not want to die such a meaningless death and realized that he had to do something to leave his mark. Rayon ended up deciding to try and hurt Darius before dying. So, he began to rush at him and toward the end managed to land a single strike, leaving Darius injured in his left arm. Darius immediately recalled how he got hurt after such a long time. However, he realized that he did not need to worry about him anymore since he was dead. Darius asked his men to clean up Rayon's corpse. Meanwhile, during his last breath, Rayon began to regret having died so soon. He did not want to get manipulated and used all his life, but that was what happened, and once he found a way to choose for himself what to do, his chance ended. Suddenly, rage started occupying Rayon, but soon as he was about to go through a change, his vessel stopped. He then woke up in a child's body who was being hugged by his mother. Rayon could not believe that he was reincarnated as Sylvia's child with all his memories of being an assassin. Rayon was also aware that he was living in a rich household, and his family happened to be pretty renowned as well. Rayon believed that it was better to be reincarnated to a rich family rather than a normal one, and this way he could easily get his revenge on Darius and the entire Robert family as well, who treated him like a hound all his life. Soon, the maid walked in and informed Sylvia about her father, the patriarch's arrival. Sylvia began to panic and realized that she needed to be ready, but it was already too late as the patriarch walked in. He turned out to be none other than Glenn Sieghart, the Northern King of Annihilation. This made Rayon realize that he was born into the most powerful family in the entire continent. Glenn ended up naming Rayon's reincarnated version as Rayon. This name meant shadow, as in he could not be seen. Later that night, Rayon woke up to see that everyone was sleeping. He finally saw that he was alone to practice his skills, as he could not utilize his mana since Sylvia would always stay with him whenever he would wake up. But this time Rayon was alone, so he began to perform Fire's Ring. This ability was a bit different from the other abilities. It acted like when a mage would create mana circles which shaped the Heart's Ring, grew stamina and physique, and increased mental prowess and mana sensitivity. Because of this feature, this ability was the best technique to be used to become a martial artist. Rayon further thought that if he could somehow manage to make Sieghart's swordsmanship his, then no one would be able to stop him from getting his revenge on Darius Robert. It was then revealed that Rayon's body mana circuit was filled with freezing energy, which explained why his body remained cold even after a lot of sleep. At this rate, Rayon believed that he would die since his circuit was about to be blocked by the cold. The only way for Rayon to overcome this was if he could use Fire's ring to break through the cold energy that he had inside him. The following day, he woke up to Sylvia standing right beside his crib. She then proceeded to lift him and started playing with him. However, Rayon found it boring and wanted to stop acting like a baby since he had the mind of an adult. All of a sudden, Sylvia heard a voice and realized that it was none other than the Saint of Rags. He happened to be the most famous physician in the entire continent, but one could not see him coming since it was impossible for them due to his wanderlust. The Saint of Rags explained that he heard Sylvia had a baby, so he decided to stop by. He then asked Sylvia the baby's name, leading her to respond and mention that it was Rayon. Immediately, he recalled that it meant shadow and believed that Glenn had gotten out of his mind to have given his grandson such a name. Meanwhile, Rayon noticed that the Saint of Rags was talking about Glenn too casually, making him realize that they both were best friends, even according to the rumors. The Saint of Rags then took a look at Rayon to see if he had any issues and discovered that he was suffering from a bitter cold case. He then advised Sylvia to take care of Rayon, concurrently, otherwise the consequence might end up leading to his death. But Sylvia chose not to believe his words since she was not ready to lose her firstborn. As the saint was continuing, the maid walked in and informed him that he was summoned by the patriarch, Glenn. He told the maid to wait for him to finish his conversation, but the maid urged that Glenn asked him to come quickly. The saint had no choice but to go to Glenn and leave his conversation in the middle. Meanwhile, Rayon believed that his condition wouldn't do much since he would end it all using Fire's ring when suddenly tears started falling on his face. Sylvia appeared to be crying her eyes out and wished that she could find a way to save her child. Rayon could not bear the tears falling from Sylvia's eyes as his heart started to ache as well. He immediately wiped off her tears, leaving her in a state of shock. She then barged in the middle of Glenn's conversation, fell on her knees, and begged him to save Rayon. Sylvia begged Glenn to save Rayon no matter what, which led him to respond and mention that Rayon was not going to bring anything for their family, as it was clear that it would be difficult for him to become a warrior. Glenn told Sylvia that the best he could do for Rayon was to give him his last name, and that's all. He asked Sylvia to consider this as a blessing and soon asked his men to escort her out of the room. However, Sylvia still kept begging Glenn to save Rayon with tears in her eyes. The Saint of Rags inquired to Glenn why he was putting up an act since he was the one to have called him to check up on his grandson, Rayon, but instead of responding, Glenn asked him to just give him details and not worry about anything else. The saint then repeated that it would be near impossible for Rayon to become a warrior due to the cold energy that's built up inside him. Glenn seemed to have no issues with that unless Rayon stayed fine. Seeing him acting completely different from just a second ago, the saint asked Glenn why he named his grandson Shadow, meaning Rayon, if he loved him so much. Glenn revealed that Rayon didn't just mean shadow. Instead, 1,000 years ago, it bore an alternative meaning. Later, Sylvia and the maid, Helen, appeared to be giving a portion of the elixir prescribed and given by the Saint of Rags. The taste seemed to be bitter, but Rayon endured it as he knew that it was something beneficial for him to get rid of the cold curse as soon as possible. Soon, 2 years passed since Rayon started consuming elixir, and he managed to get the first ring of fire. As the days passed, Rayon kept getting better and better at everything that he did and ended up getting the second ring of fire. Rayon was now 5 years of age, and his fire had evolved to spin in a cross shape. He had also become more sensitive to mana. Soon, Rayon pulled out his system screen that he obtained when he got his hands on the first ring of fire. Helen suddenly walked in to take Rayon's clothes for laundry, and this was when Rayon discovered that the system screen was not visible to anyone but him. Now that Rayon was a 2-star fire ring user, he still had to find a way to deal with his curse and low stamina. He also realized that the elixir wasn't the only thing that helped him become 2-star. Rather, it was a collective effort from Sylvia and Helen, both of who would constantly check up on Rayon to see if he was sick or not. Rayon also realized that he needed some more time to prepare himself as he was only 5 at the time. He understood that Darius was not someone easy to kill, and for that, He needed to be prepared in the best possible way. With the fire ring, if he could get his hands on Sieghart, then he would have fatter chances to get his revenge. Soon, Sylvia walked in and reminded Rayon that they needed to visit a place that she told him about earlier. This was the day when the 6 kings and 5 demons would maintain the balance of power in the continent. House Sieghart was one of the kings. Sometime later, Sylvia and Rayon walked into the mansion where the event was about to take place. After noticing their arrival, people began to talk badly of Sylvia and discovered that she had a son as well. They didn't even spare the son as they began to call both of them words. There, Sylvia asked Rayon to calm down and just follow her. In no time, Glenn made his arrival, followed by everyone to acquire a silent state. Glenn saw that everyone had arrived and went on to summon the Sword of Judgment. He then announced the commencement of the Judgment Ceremony. How the Sword of Judgment worked is that one had to place their hands on the stone sword, and the sword would begin to determine the mana ability that the person possessed. The first person to test it was Bauen Sieghart. We discovered that from the age of 4, child's skull that was open toward the sky begins to close, and then the child's mana ability remains stagnant. This ceremony was the ceremony in which these children gathered to determine their mana ability. As Bauen put his hand on the sword, it showed that he possessed the wind attribute, which happened to be best suited for swordsmen. Glenn then suggested Bauen focus on channeling wind forth. The next child that was called was Renan Sullian from the vassal family of Sullian. The light traveled on the sword, and judging by how far it got, it determined how pure the mana ability was, while the mana's attribute was indicated by the tip of the sword. Some people began to anticipate what attribute Renan would get, but they were expecting something very high. Seeing this, Sylvia realized that these people valued mana ability more than their lives. Meanwhile, Rayon had no confidence left in him, as he knew he would not do much in his judgment test. He was aware that he had a 2-star fire ring, but that would not help him either. Soon enough, Rayon was the last person to find out what mana ability he possessed and was asked to come forward. Rayon was not expecting much, but just wanted to know what type of mana attribute he possessed so he could carry on cultivating it in the future. Sylvia advises Rayon to do exactly as the other kids did. With that, Rayon proceeded to move forward and began to put his hand on the stone sword. As he touched the sword, it began to exert a strange light that seemed to be scattered here and there. He then witnessed demon-shaped monsters appearing right in front of his eyes, followed by a young swordsman standing in a firm position while lifting his sword. Rayon did not understand what was going on and saw that the light did not even reach the halfway mark on the sword. Soon, the light disappeared, and the people around began to hysterically laugh at Rayon's poor ability. They were laughing because they had never seen the light not even reaching the halfway mark. They began to discuss how useless Rayon's power was and how he inherited nothing from Glenn other than his last name and the red eyes. They began murmuring about how the loser of a child Rayon is, while on the other hand, Sylvia was telling Rayon that he did well. As the room was getting too loud, Glenn called for silence and asked all of them to leave since they were getting too noisy. That marked the end of the judgment ceremony. Glenn then looked over at his right hand and mentioned that it could not be helped. Although he did not expect much, this was far below the expectations. Soon, Glenn recalled how the light was shining brighter than usual and that it had a light golden color to it. He immediately recalled how the first Sieghart Patriarch's aura displayed transcendental firepower that could even melt the flames of the demonic realm. Golden mana and golden flames were only one-time occurrences in Sieghart's history. After assessing everything that happened when Rayon put his hand on the stone sword, Glenn realized that Rayon possessed the golden flames. This revelation had taken Glenn by surprise, as he was not expecting something like that to happen, or anywhere even close to it. We then saw a glimpse of Rayon's status window. He appeared to have unknown decreased mana sensitivity traits, with a 2-star ring of fire and a 2-star water resistance. 7 years had passed since the judgment ceremony, and Rayon was 12 years old now. He decided that it was time for him to upgrade his fire ring to 3-star. Several years had passed since the last judgment ceremony, and Rayon had been training constantly. He was working hard, which enabled him to get closer to making his fire ring a 3-star. If it was not for his curse, he could have progressed much quicker than he is right now. However, his water resistance had reached the star rating of 2, which enabled him to stop being cold, but it was still difficult for him to move around. something that he needed to take care of desperately. Rayon decided that he should start physical training again when suddenly his mother walked and reminded him that they were already running late. It appeared that the time for the second judgment ceremony had already arrived. It was going to be another encounter between Sylvia, Rayon, and the judgmental group of people. Later at the judgment ceremony, Roan realized that the judgment ceremony was just for indirect bloodlines this time. Glenn, in a daunting tone, asked Rayon as to why he did not respond to the orders of attending basic training for over a month. Following this, Sylvia quickly came forward and explained that Rayon was different from other children. She pleaded with Glenn not to send Rayon for training since the coldness in his body would not let him last long. This shocked Rayon to see that Sylvia knew all along about his cold temperature. However, Glenn made it clear that there was no leniency even for someone with the name of Sieghart. He explained how Rayon should crawl and train if he was unable to move since that was Sieghart's way. But Sylvia was still opposed to Glenn's order, telling him that Rayon would not be able to endure it. This led Glenn to question Sylvia if she would leave the family again. He further told Sylvia that Rayon would have trained no matter what, and if she had any objection then she was free to leave the family. This gave people the opportunity to once again begin discussing how Sylvia left her home before. They believed that someone like Sylvia did not deserve to have the last name of Sieghart. Meanwhile, Rayon understood why his mom had been getting insulted all her life. It was because she had left the family already once. She happened to have traces of having learned martial arts, but she ended up having no aura. Thus, she broke her mana circuits and energy core and left to marry Rayon's father. But his father died when Sylvia was pregnant, leaving her no choice but to come back to her home. This was what people thought, but for Rayon, it made no difference what his mother did in the past since she was his mother after all. He could not see her getting humiliated every other day, so Rayon decided to take a step. He walked up to Glenn and told him that he was going to take the basic training. There, the current martial hall master explained to Rayon that it would be near impossible for him to go through the training, leading Rayon to mention that he wanted to live up to Sieghart's name. Glenn stood up and began exerting his aura, telling Rayon that his words carried very heavy weight. Immediately, Sylvia and the hall master began asking Glenn to calm down since Rayon was just a child. Determined, Rayon stood up once again, telling Glenn that he wanted to learn how high the Sieghart family was through training. He explained that he would protect Sylvia and would make sure to regain the smiles on the faces of his loved ones. Glenn realized that he needed to prepare the trainer for this. At the same time, Rayon was determined to show everyone what he was capable of. Later, Karun Sieghart could not believe that Rayon had an illness since he was able to withstand Glenn's aura. Karun then ordered a maid to be put as a spy in the annex and to have her report everything back to him. Chanting the name of the respected patriarch, the secretary saluted the guard and made way for him as he walked down his path into the annex. A mysterious man with long red hair and pointy ears lay comfortably on a couch, his face hidden by a hat. The patriarch approached the man and addressed him as Rimmer, asking him to stop pretending to be asleep and to get up. Rimmer sat up immediately at this call and commended the patriarch's perceptiveness, noting that his sleeping techniques didn't work on him. Glenn expressed concern that Rimmer, as the head instructor, was wasting time on nonsense while other instructors were working hard. Rimmer playfully responded that they were following orders and working with their bodies, while he worked with his head. Annoyed, Glenn exclaimed that Rimmer hadn't matured in 50 years. Rimmer laughed it off, noting that people don't change, especially elves. Observing Glenn's concern, Rimmer asked if he was there to talk about his grandson, noting that Sylvia had visited too, surprising Glenn. She had asked Rimmer to ensure Rayon wasn't hurt. Rimmer asserted that if Glenn was there to ask the same, it was a waste of time, as Glenn had promised not to interfere in the 5th training hall. Rimmer emphasized he wouldn't make exceptions for Glenn's grandson either, which Glenn surprisingly agreed to. Glenn firmly asked Rimmer not to lessen the training intensity, wanting no weaklings. Shocked, Rimmer noted Glenn's deep love for his grandson, angering Glenn, who retorted that Rimmer's head would roll if he wasn't a veteran friend. Glenn instructed Rimmer to fail the unworthy, ensuring only the worthy received training. Rimmer agreed, and Glenn left, with Rimmer pondering Rayon's training. The message window appeared, updating Rayon's abilities and stats, highlighting his achievement of the 3rd Ring of Fire. Rayon smiled, feeling the difference between the 3-star rings, noting increased sensitivity and mental clarity. Recalling Sylvia helping him up and scolding him for pushing too hard on the first day, Rayon appreciated her timely intervention, which made his body more flexible. He acknowledged the status window's role in quickening his growth, but recognized that Sieghart's training was notoriously difficult. Determined, he resolved to excel to silence those who mocked him and envisioned himself as a commandant in the Sieghart family. Lost in thought, Rayon was interrupted by Sylvia calling him. She sat on his bed, explaining that she wanted to talk before he went to the training hall. She expressed her worry about him getting hurt and asked him to postpone his enrollment by a year. Rayon refused, recalling humiliating moments and expressing his inability to stand the disgust in people's eyes when they saw her. Sylvia was speechless, but Rayon comforted her, believing she'd be treated better if he succeeded in training. Sylvia nervously explained her past, falling in love with Rayon's father during a mission and leaving the family because he was just a knight. She mentioned Rayon's sister, who was 10 years older. Their peaceful life was shattered when Eden's executive ambushed them, killing Rayon's father and sister while Sylvia was pregnant. She returned to the family, who treated them like sinners. Rayon, deeming his mother selfish for abandoning her responsibilities for love, nonetheless appreciated her affection, considering her his only mother. Rayon asked Sylvia if she regretted her past, but she denied it, saying she felt invisible in the family but like a real person after leaving. She was happy then and now. Apologizing for being a terrible mother, Sylvia was interrupted by Rayon, who assured her he'd be fine and asked her not to worry. Gazing into each other's eyes, Rayon reminded himself of his resolve to help her regain her position in the family. Sylvia's tears turned into sobs, surprising Rayon, who asked her to stop crying. He saw her out and sighed, finding reassurance hard. Sitting on his bed, Rayon planned to check the malleability of the Ring of Fire before sleeping. Performing the technique, blue flames flared up. He noted the ring spun faster at level 3 and wondered about intermediate levels. Suddenly, the flames blazed violently and burst into the air. A voice spoke, revealing itself as Wrath, the second lord of the demon realm, offering to help Rayon's revenge. Surprised, Rayon questioned this claim. A message window appeared, unlocking 2 new traits. Rage was activated, but the second remained untitled. The blue flame continued to rage as it offered its help to Rayon but then stopped in shock, questioning why a child stood before it. Rayon prepared to engage the mysterious fireball and asked what it was. The fireball, confused, noted that Rayon's rage wasn't typical for a child. Upon realizing Rayon was hiding a deep rage, it asked for his body and soul to help him get revenge. Rayon wondered if the fire was there due to his past violent rage against Darth Robert, but expressed that it was too late. Skeptical, Rayon refused the offer, confusing the fireball, which had anticipated acceptance. Rayon asserted he would exact revenge on Darth himself, thinking he couldn't rely on another for this matter. The fireball, not buying this claim, stated it wasn't negotiating. It flared up, declaring it had already made its decision. As the flames caught Rayon's body, he noticed they were cold, indicating something strange. Rayon stepped back, and the fireball advanced, yelling for Rayon to give it his body. The flames reached Rayon, and a burst of light illuminated the room. Feeling unwell, Rayon clutched his chest, shocked, feeling as if his mind would freeze over. He realized the coldness was an attribute of the fireball and that it was stimulating his rage. Torturous memories replayed in Rayon's mind, and a mysterious avatar urged him to think of the person who caused his rage. Shivering, Rayon curled up, thankful for his water attribute tolerance. He realized the attack wasn't just cold, but also stimulating his rage. The mysterious entity's voice demanded vengeance, and Rayon briefly gave up his body. However, recalling joyful moments with his mother and maids, he worried about their safety if he gave in. Determined, he refused to let the entity have his body. The fireball reappeared, urging Rayon to give in to his rage. It declared it would minimize damage while using Rayon's body, but threatened to swallow him whole if he resisted. The situation worsened, evident by Rayon's struggle to catch his breath. He expressed regret, feeling he was at his limit and might die. Then, Realizing his water tolerance could reduce the pain, he countered the cold with the ring of fire. The heat pushed away the cold, surprising the fireball. The entity, annoyed by a child's resistance, questioned Rayon's resilience. As the cold receded and the ring of fire intensified, Rayon warned he would get revenge on his own, not needing a ghost's help. Offended, the fireball raged at being called a ghost. Rayon taunted the entity, questioning its power. Infuriated, the fireball declared it hadn't been long since its awakening, hinting at its incomplete strength. Rayon's thoughts were interrupted by a system message unlocking special abilities, showing his stats and numbers. The Demon Lord freaked out, questioning why Rayon had his authority. Rayon asked if the Demon Lord had anything to do with the message windows format. The Demon Lord affirmed it was his system but questioned its presence with Rayon. Rayon noted the system's role in enhancing his Ring of Fire ability. Enraged, the Demon Lord demanded Rayon give up his authority and body. As the Demon Lord attacked, Rayon countered with mana, realizing the spirit had no physical body. Alone in sensing the spirit, Rayon noted aura wouldn't work on it. The Demon Lord, fed up, transformed into a bracelet with ice crystal beads, declaring his powers would soon return, and he'd stick with Rayon till death. Rayon, nervous, called the entity a leech but feared losing the system if he removed it. Concerned for Sylvia and Helen's safety, Rayon decided to keep the Demon Lord close, planning to grow stronger before the Demon Lord regained full power. Annoyed by the bracelet's appearance, Rayon asked why it took a floral form. The Demon Lord demanded respect for his taste. Rayon sighed in frustration. The next morning, Helen and Sylvia waited in the Annex's Grand Hall. Sylvia, worried for Rayon, was consoled by Helen, who assured her that Rayon would do well. Rayon called out that he was ready, and Sylvia and Helen glanced at him as he descended the stairs, smiling, ready for the training hall. Rayon left the Annex for his big day at the training hall, with Helen worriedly advising him not to push himself too much. This led Rayon to affirm Helen's concerns and begin leaving. Helen then questioned Sylvia if she was going to see Rayon off after noticing her sad demeanor. Sylvia ended up listening to Helen's words as she crouched to hold Rayon, expressing her belief in him. Rayon smiled at this beautiful gesture from his mother and shared the same sentiment as he affirmed that he wouldn't push himself too hard and wouldn't give up if it got too difficult. After Rayon's departure, Sylvia still couldn't help herself but stay worried about Rayon's well-being. She asked Helen if she thought he would be all right. Helen comforted Sylvia and reminded her that Rayon had been improving every day and might even pass the training. She couldn't help but feel anxious, recalling that Rayon was different from other children, which led Rayon to once again assure his mom that he would return safely. At the training grounds, numerous young participants walked up the walkway into the training hall as they conversed with each other, asking where they were from. A group of siblings stood out as they smiled and mentioned that their parents told them to get into the top 10. Walking among the huge crowd of aspiring martial artists was our hero Rayon, and he was also a bit surprised to see the number of people present. He realized that it was not just people from the Sieghart family's direct and indirect bloodlines, but also recommended students from the vassal families and outside. This was when he overheard students chuckling and whispering about him, calling and pointing fingers at him. He looked over his shoulder to find students laughing and whispering as they made fun of him, expressing that he looked fragile. The students also made fun of the floral bracelet. Enraged, Rayon confronted them by pulling out the spirit of the blue ball of fire, calling them parasites, warning them of consequences, and challenging them to say the insults to his face. The students, taken aback, pointed out his status as someone living in an annex and not from the direct bloodline. Rayon retorted that they too were from indirect bloodlines, and thus had no right to belittle him. Just as a fight was about to break out, Bauen Sieghart, from the direct bloodline, intervened. He scolded the students for shaming the Sieghart name and told Rayon to know his place. Bauen, recalling Rayon's unexpected success during the judgment ceremony, was convinced Rayon would fail the training. Rayon, however, taunted Bauen, claiming his arrogance stemmed only from his direct bloodline status. Before the confrontation could escalate, Rimmer, a brilliant swordsman of the Sieghart family, appeared and instructed the students to postpone their fight until after the entrance ceremony. During the ceremony, Rimmer introduced himself as the head instructor and announced that the number of candidates, 160, would be cut down to a quarter through a series of tests. This sparked confusion among the students. Rimmer emphasized that he preferred a small number of elites and encouraged the students to start running immediately. As they sprinted, Rayon observed that Rimmer was evaluating their potential and temperament, not just physical performance. While Bain and another student, Renan, led the race, Rayon stayed at the back, knowing that endurance was key. Observing the race, instructors commented on Bain and Renan's extraordinary speed and potential. They also noted Rayon's struggle but acknowledged his effort despite his past illness. Rimmer, however, found Rayon intriguing, unable to gauge his potential, which he usually could for other trainees. He concluded that Rayon might be stronger than him, making his potential unreachable. The two kids who had mocked Rayon earlier ran past him, taunting him for his earlier arrogance. Despite this, Rayon continued to run with determination. He reflected on his past life, where running from starved beasts was basic training, and found this current training relatively easy. The race continued with students rushing forward on the track. Rimmer, observing the students, singled out Rayon, questioning how he was still running despite exhausting his stamina long ago. He concluded that Rayon had the mentality of someone trained to survive until the brink of death, which was fascinating for a young child. Rimmer found Rayon quite interesting. Seeing Rayon continue running and keeping up with him enraged Bain. He scoffed and questioned just how Rayon was still able to keep running when he was told that the boy was too weak to train. He recalled the information provided by his messenger that the Saint of Rags had assessed Rayon with the curse of the bitter cold. Rayon had a low chance of surviving childhood, let alone learning martial arts. Even at first glance, it was not a secret that Rayon looked fragile. Annoyed at things not going according to plan and everyone proving him wrong, Bain gritted his teeth in frustration before yelling out and utilizing a burst of energy, leaving Renan and Rayon behind. Rayon observed Bain's childish behavior and decided to maintain his pace, knowing this was a test, not a competition. The sun scorched the ground, and exhausted students fell to catch their breaths. Some students wondered how Rayon, who was supposedly weak, kept running. Rayon felt the coldness in his body and the strain on his heart and lungs, but used the ring of fire to squeeze out any remaining stamina. The blue spirit within him demanded his body and soul, but Rayon refused, enduring the cold. Despite the pain, Rayon knew he had to endure and confronted the spirit, telling it to stop. The demon lord intensified the cold, but Rayon held on, determined not to show weakness. As fatigue caught up, Rayon felt like he might collapse, but the test ended, and he joined the students to catch his breath. Bain, frustrated, called him a determined bastard. Renan observed Rayon while the spirit of the demon lord raged, questioning how Rayon managed to pull it off. Rayon noticed his physical capacity had improved thanks to the ring of fire. A status window notified him of increased experience points and capabilities, which astonished him. The demon lord, frustrated, questioned why Rayon was gaining points. Rimmer then commended the students and revealed he was lying about cutting down their numbers to a quarter, causing the students to react angrily. He explained he couldn't fail so many on the first day, but warned that most would fail if they didn't improve. Rimmer pointed out that none had kept up until the end except Rayon, and he didn't care how they did it as long as they took the test. He reminded them they were now provisional trainees and would become official trainees after passing a test in 6 months. He joyfully mentioned he would pick the top trainees. Rimmer then guided the students to the top-quality dormitories provided by the Sieghart family. In the forest near the training hall, Rimmer met the patriarch, Glenn. Rimmer addressed Glenn, who asked what had happened. Rimmer explained that Bain and Renan were talented, but he couldn't see anything in Rayon, which intrigued him. He told Glenn that Rayon had run out of stamina but kept running, a first after Glenn himself. Glenn leaped off a stone, telling Rimmer to focus on his duties. Rimmer believed someone this year could be his successor, but Glenn dismissed it as a coincidence, stating the child couldn't become a martial artist. Rimmer acknowledged Glenn's statement but smiled, knowing it wasn't just a coincidence. Sighing and finally having the rest he needed, Rayon set off to the training center now that the test was all over. 2 students glared at him as he stepped away, and the blue ball of fire was amazed that Rayon did not seem to stop training. The group of students behind Rayon glared with murderous intent. As the sun set over the training grounds, they exclaimed it to be impossible. Two students rallied on about how there was no way Rayon held on for that long when they had heard he was sick. They continued while the yellow-haired man from the indirect lineage, Karun Sieghart, gleefully assessed the situation. Karun suggested Rayon had miracle medicine from the Saint of Rags, which shocked the trainees, leading them to believe Rayon depended on the medicine to run that long. Concluding their assessment, Karun suggested they teach Rayon a lesson about using cheats in the training. In the next scene, Rayon was slammed into a tree under the pale moonlight, groaning in pain and asking why the students were doing this. Karun scoffed, and the other two students accused Rayon of arrogance because of the miracle medicine. Rayon assessed their rage and concluded they were mad over something stupid. The group prepared to attack, claiming they were just there to talk. As they threatened him, Karun rushed forward, but Rayon struck him away with a punch to the face, shocking everyone, including the spirit of the demon lord. Karun fell to the ground and Rayon, using the same threatening tone, questioned their claim to talk. As the two students rushed forward, their attempts were futile against the world's best assassin. Another student called upon them and tried to take on Rayon but was also defeated. The spirit of the demon lord watched in awe. The beaten students begged for mercy, and Rayon stepped on Karun's hand, asking who made them do this, suspecting Bayan. Karun denied Bayan's involvement, surprising Rayon. Rayon then threatened Karun to avoid him if he didn't want another conversation. The group rushed off, but Rimmer watched from the shadows, deeming Rayon interesting and talented in martial arts, making him a true Sieghart. Back at the training halls, Rayon gazed upon the message window as it notified him of Wrath being satisfied, increasing his agility by 1. The spirit of the demon lord expressed frustration, questioning the increase in ability, and Rayon asked why he didn't know when he made the system. The spirit explained that Rayon was stealing his power. Rayon acknowledged this in glee, annoying the spirit. The spirit then offered a bet with Wrath's rage and Rayon's experience points on the line. Rayon accepted, believing his past life experience would ensure he wouldn't lose. At dawn, students lay on the ground, sweating and panting after running early in the morning. They struggled with the horse-riding pose, which Rimmer explained as the building block of martial arts. One student yelled out, wanting to learn actual swordsmanship from the head instructor. Bayan called upon them to stand up and stop complaining, focusing on swordsmanship. Wrath asked Rayon if he would join them, but Rayon walked away, stating he needed to train his body as it was weaker due to the bitter cold curse. He believed the basics were most important for growth. Rayon sat in a plank, sweating profusely while exercising. Renan Sullian from the vassal family spied on him, noticing his fast improvement. She was conflicted over hearing he was ill, yet seeing his consistent training. She approached him, concluding there was something peculiar about him. Rayon innocently wrapped the band around his palm and curiously asked why she was there. Glaring at each other, the atmosphere grew tense as no one broke the silence. Renan wondered why Rayon was growing so rapidly. Suddenly, a cold breeze rushed at her, and she stood still in a daze. Moving forward, she sat beside him without warning and began lifting the weights he had lifted. Rayon, confused by this strange act, did not understand what was happening. Annoyingly, Renan followed him around the room, copying him by lifting different weights. She thought to herself that ever since she had smelled the cool and pleasant scent from Rayon, her body felt lighter, allowing her to lift much heavier weights than usual. Rayon, curious about her behavior, asked if she had something to tell him, but she denied it. Not thinking much of it, he walked away silently while Renan continued to follow him, concluding she might need to stick close to him for a while. Bayan entered the room with other students, observing Renan following Rayon. Without any expression, he scoffed and questioned why such a girl was following a guy like Rayon. Grabbing a wooden stick, he claimed Rayon was wasting his time with repetitive training. Bun believed Rayon was weak and that such basic training would not bring him to their level. He asserted that they should train in swordsmanship to prepare for the upcoming test. Calling upon his friends, he walked away, dismissing Rayon from the indirect lineage. confident that the test results would speak for themselves. While Rayon was training, a student named Dorian approached him, introducing himself and asking if he could train next to Rayon and Renan. Rayon indifferently allowed it, and Dorian, grateful, offered him a cookie. Rayon refused and passed the cookie to Renan, who was in awe of the mysterious food item. Handing over the cookie to her, Dorian noted her uniqueness. Leaves fluttered away, marking the passage of time as Rayon trained diligently, running on tracks, lifting weights, and ensuring he was in peak condition. Other students also worked hard, preparing for the test that could determine their futures. Rayon narrated that it had been 6 months of intense training, running every day until he was exhausted. He noted that the backs of those he saw in front of him while running were no longer there, leaving only 2 people ahead of him. Finally, the morning of the test arrived, and families of the participants gathered in the arena, anticipating their children's success. An announcer greeted everyone and instructed them to follow his directions carefully. Wrath appeared before Rayon, reminding him of the bet he made months ago. Wrath taunted him, but Rayon remained unfazed, insisting this test would be different. Diverted towards Dorian, Rayon noticed him lying on the ground in despair, explaining he hadn't slept all night due to nerves. Rayon comforted him, and Renan offered Dorian a cookie, which he refused. Vaughn passed by, acknowledging the odd people around Rayon. Among the crowd, Sylvia excitedly pointed out Rayon to Helen, who admired Rayon's strength and confidence. Helen expressed pride in Rayon's hard training and the friends he had made, praising his warm personality. Sylvia smiled, proud of her child, when the patriarch's entrance was suddenly announced. Glenn, the patriarch, stepped into the arena, his bright red attire and shiny blonde hair making a statement that intimidated the audience. Glenn prepared to sit on his throne as attendees bowed down, noting his unusual presence at the test. Rimmer, the brilliant sword of the Sieghart family, expressed concern about Glenn's sudden appearance. Glenn stated that the event chose the family's future and questioned why they acted surprised by his presence. Rimmer nervously assured that the patriarch was always welcome on the training grounds. Wasting no time, Rimmer announced the test details. A green leaf fell to the ground, followed by a green aura bursting out and enveloping the students. Startled, their eyes widened at the sudden wave of strong aura. Rayon expressed his concern as Rimmer's green aura rushed forward, glaring menacingly at the students. Rimmer elaborated that the test required the students to make it through his aura. Rimmer elaborated that aura is inherent to a martial artist, and this test would judge the students' worth as martial artists. Before the students could begin the test, a commotion arose among the families. A man stood up, questioning the fairness of the test, stating that some students had just started learning aura. The small commotion turned into a situation when the man yelled out that this was unfair because some of the students had yet to even learn aura. He exclaimed that the head instructor had also been spotted sleeping during training. Rimmer sighed at the unfortunate situation and explained to the concerned families that the test was not just a manifestation of aura but the level of the soul that a martial artist achieved. He added that this proved that a martial artist could manifest energy without aura. But the man who sparked the conversation did not seem to buy his explanation and raised concern once again. Soon, the patriarch, Glenn, supported Rimmer, explaining that even those without aura possessed their aura burst based on their experiences. Glenn emphasized that intense training could result in a strong aura burst regardless of aura mastery. Adhering to all the concerns, Rimmer now asked if all questions had been answered before exclaiming for the test to begin. He then called forth Renan, who began to slowly step forward. Rimmer explained to her that the aura burst she would face would be endurable if she had trained hard. She would pass by getting through his aura to touch him. As the test began, a strong green aura rushed at Renan, who blocked it with her arms. Rimmer warned that using her aura would fail and urged her to awaken her mental power. Despite the struggle, Renan managed to reach and grab Rimmer's hand, marking the end of her test. He grabbed Renan close to him as she slumped over him with exhaustion and remarked that her passing the test was easy. While Renan was trying to catch her breath, the head instructor commended her hard work, asking her to continue training like she had. Moving on with the next participant, Rimmer called forth Dorian, who nervously stepped forward. Rimmer instructed him to get through his aura burst using his trained mentality. Dorian doubted his ability due to his weak-mindedness. Despite struggling heavily and falling to the ground, Dorian managed to grab hold of Rimmer, who commended him for his skill and encouraged him to believe in himself more. Dorian, overcome with nerves, vomited after passing the test. One by one, the students faced their tests. When it was Baoen's turn, he enthusiastically stepped forward. Rimmer unleashed a powerful green aura, startling Baoen. He struggled, realizing the test's difficulty compared to merely observing. Baoen fell to his knees, but was determined not to fail. A flashback of his father's disappointment pushed him forward in desperation. He grabbed Rimmer's leg, passing the test. Rimmer advised Baoen to train only what he should and warned that looking up while walking could lead to tripping over a stick. Finally, Rimmer called Rayon. As Rayon stepped forward, ready for his test, Rimmer unleashed the strongest aura burst of the day. The intense wave of energy surprised both Sylvia and the Patriarch, who questioned the unusual display of power. Despite the overwhelming aura, Rayon remained resolute, acknowledging his potential lay within his soul, once tormented as an assassin. Enduring the energy, Rayon took a step forward, astonishing Rimmer and the Patriarch with his talent. Rayon pressed his palm against Rimmer's chest, marking the end of the test. The crowd gasped in shock at Rayon's feat, smiling without exhaustion. Rayon asked if the test was over, leaving Rimmer and the Patriarch in awe of his incredible talent. The students shared the sentiment of disbelief, questioning how the once-weak Rayon managed to get through the most powerful aura burst. Baoen's father and his messenger were equally shocked. Rimmer, taken aback, walked up to Rayon, asking what he was. Rayon reintroduced himself, mentioning that the head had observed him for 6 months. Rimmer admitted he had underestimated Rayon and was only pranking him. Rimmer apologized for being distracted and announced the test's end. As he prepared to announce the top trainee, Baoen's anxiety spiked. The crowd held its breath in anticipation but was shocked when Rimmer named Rayon as the top trainee. Sylvia burst into tears of joy, and Helen celebrated. However, family representatives were unhappy with the decision, and Baoen challenged Rayon to a duel to decide the top trainee. Rimmer noted Baoen's desperation and suggested a duel with the Patriarch. Glenn asked Rayon if he would accept a duel, and Rayon declined, stating the test results were fair. Rayon called Baoen a sore loser, leading Baoen to scoff in frustration. The Patriarch proposed a duel with a bronze plaque as a reward. Rayon accepted, recognizing the value of the plaque. The duel began, and Baoen attacked fiercely. Rayon blocked and countered, their fight intense. Baoen, desperate to prove himself to his father, unleashed a barrage of attacks. Amidst the fight, Rayon noticed Baoen's attacks slowing down and saw his moves. Baoen, frustrated, leaped to strike Rayon, who countered with a powerful punch, knocking Baoen back. Baoen's father and the crowd were shocked. Baoen questioned how Rayon used his martial arts skill, and Rayon bluntly answered that he had simply copied Baoen. The Patriarch, impressed, acknowledged Rayon's victory, cementing his position as the top trainee. The recent martial arts duel shocked everyone. Rayon amazed the spectators by performing incredible feats, including the righteous tiger fist, without any aura training. Nervousness filled the arena as the surprised families began to speculate that maybe the student had learned the skill in secret, which they believed was the only logical explanation. Rayon, despite feeling some pain, stood victorious while Baoen, his defeated opponent, bowed in shame. Meanwhile, Rimmer stood before the victorious Rayon. Rimmer had to cover his open mouth with his hand to hide his astonishment at the shocking results. Assessing Rayon's incredible show of intelligence, he elaborated that Rayon countered Baoen's attack by having him spin in the other direction. He mentioned that just seeing the flow of someone can make them worthy of being called a genius in the world of martial arts. Concluding his assessment, Rimmer explained that Rayon used the flow to make his opponent's technique his own. Rimmer believed that this kind of talent easily set someone on the path to being the strongest on the continent, and now that he had seen it for himself in Rayon, he expressed that this was the kind of talent that the Patriarch had wanted, naming it to be perpetual talent. He concluded the test by declaring Rayon the winner. After the test, Rayon's mother, Sylvia, rushed onto the battlefield and hugged her son with tears of joy. Wrath, another family member, impatiently asked to go home because he was hungry. Renan's parents also celebrated her success, embracing her with tears of joy. Meanwhile, Ban was taken away by his father's messenger, who had a somber look. Ban saw his father in the crowd, who glared at him with disappointment before turning away. This left Ban feeling devastated and ashamed. Later that night, Ban faced his father, Karun, in a dark room. Karun, with his back turned, suddenly called out Ban's name, causing the young warrior to tremble. Karun questioned if Ban remembered his promise to become the top trainee and not to lose. Ban, nervously, confirmed his father's expectations. Karun was furious, accusing Ban of shaming the family by losing to Rayon, a student from a fallen family. He warned Ban not to end up like his brother, who had faced similar disappointment. Karun demanded that Ban redeem himself by becoming the top trainee by graduation and ordered him to leave. Under the moonlight, Ban walked away, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. He struck a wall in anger, causing it to crack, and cursed Rayon for his unexpected victory. Ban questioned why he was in such a difficult position despite his hard work. His wandering led him to a mysterious building, which he entered out of habit. Inside, he found the training hall empty and began to explore. Ban came across a locker with Rayon's name. Curious, he opened it and discovered a collection of used shoes, at least 10 pairs. This surprised him, as he had only needed to replace his shoes twice in 6 months. Seeing Rayon's worn-out shoes made Ban reflect on Rayon's dedication to training. He realized that Rayon's relentless effort, even when Ban had been resting or pretending to train, was what truly embodied the Sieghart way. As Ban realized his shortcomings, he felt deep remorse. He understood that he had been neglecting the true spirit of training and had instead been following a misguided path. With a sense of self-loathing, he put the shoes back in the locker and left the training hall. Determined to change, Ban vowed to improve himself and make his family proud, though he still harbored a grudge against Rayon for his surprising victory. Wrath expressed his frustration, stating that in his hundreds of lives, he had never encountered anyone like Rayon. He confronted Rayon, asking what he was, but Rayon dismissed the question, saying he didn't know and Wrath could imagine whatever he wanted. A message window appeared in front of Rayon, and he asked Wrath about the skill displayed. Wrath identified it as Legendary Senses, a skill he claimed was unfit for Rayon. He explained that the skill expanded one's senses by 10% at a 1-star level, but Wrath boasted that he could increase his senses tenfold with it. Rayon found this amusing. Rayon moved away from his bed, with the spirit of the demon lord following him. Rayon asked why the skill had its name, and Wrath said he made it up because it sounded cool, though Rayon disagreed, criticizing Wrath's taste in names. Wrath angrily retorted that Rayon lacked artistic sense. The sun shone on the annex, and Rayon and Sylvia were surprised when a voice announced that the Patriarch had summoned Rayon. Sylvia anxiously questioned if Rayon had done something wrong, but the butler assured her there was nothing to worry about. The Patriarch wanted to give Rayon his bronze plaque reward personally. Rayon bowed before the Patriarch, who, though unwilling, said he must keep his promise. The butler presented the bronze plaque, and Glenn, the Patriarch, bestowed it upon Rayon. Glenn explained that if Rayon returned the plaque later, he would receive an item of equal value. Rayon, thinking briefly, said he wanted to ask for a reward now, mentioning his mother. This surprised Glenn, who hadn't expected her name to come up. Rayon asked what he had to do to restore his mother's position in the family. Glenn, taken aback, said it was possible but difficult, akin to picking the moon from the night sky. Despite the challenge, Rayon smiled, saying at least it was possible, and he returned the plaque to the butler. As Rayon left, the Patriarch called him back, saying Rayon's question would have been answered even without the plaque. This surprised Rayon, who didn't expect such softness from Glenn. Glenn then asked about Rayon's proper reward. Rayon requested a special training technique, to which Glenn initially said the instructors would teach him during basic training. However, Rayon explained he needed better aura training than what was offered, asking for a technique equivalent to the bronze plaque's value. Glenn mentioned a training technique and a door opened, revealing a hall filled with countless bookshelves. Glenn instructed Rayon to place his hand in the middle to receive the book he needed most. Nervously, Rayon did so, hoping for something better than his past life's shadow technique. A book slid out and fell into Rayon's hands, titled Thousand Flames Technique. Seeing this, Glenn and the butler were surprised and agitated. The book fluttered violently, releasing a strong wave of energy, enveloping Rayon in golden light. The patriarch watched with an observant glare. In a flashback, Glenn ignored a man's concerns about Sylvia being ostracized, focusing only on the family's power. He learned Sylvia had left with a man, but dismissed it as trivial. Later, a messenger reported Sylvia and her husband were ambushed by Eden, resulting in their deaths. Glenn trembled in sadness and anger, realizing he had regained his emotions too late. The energy burst subsided, revealing a confused Rayon. He felt something flowing into his head. Glenn asked what he had done, and Rayon, nervous, said he didn't know but remembered the technique's contents. When Glenn asked its name, Rayon identified it as the Thousand Flames technique. A message window then notified Rayon that the technique had been saved in his memory. After the thunderous reveal of Rayon's newfound technique, the patriarch asked if he knew the contents of the book, and Rayon confirmed. Glenn sat back on his throne, acknowledging Rayon's new talent and excusing him since he had received his reward. Rayon left the hall with a look of confusion. After Rayon departed, the butler expressed skepticism about the technique Rayon now possessed, but Glenn interrupted him. He explained that the technique belonged to the first Sieghart patriarch, and no one else in the family had ever been able to obtain the book or call it forth. Glenn expressed concern for his daughter and grandson's safety, while the butler shared this sentiment, warning of possible dangers. Glenn assured him not to worry, as no one else knew about the Thousand Flames technique. Rayon smiled as he walked out with his new training technique. The butler again raised concerns about the book disappearing, but Glenn explained that it was fine because someone had now learned the technique. He added that it wasn't just a training technique and suggested that things might change. Meanwhile, Rayon contemplated the new technique, questioning why the patriarch gifted him such a powerful technique, noting it was worth more than the gold plaque. He positioned himself in concentration, realizing the technique was difficult to learn. He saw himself approaching a burning fire, but when he reached out, it moved away. He acknowledged his failure, emphasizing the difficulty of the technique. Wrath addressed Rayon, stating that things weren't working out as he wanted, but encouraged him to keep trying. He warned Rayon to be careful while in such a state, as the technique was good but could be dangerous. Rayon agreed, noting the technique allowed a person to absorb nature's energy to build aura inside their core. He added that interrupting the process could damage the mana circuits or core, which was risky due to his existing cold curse. Rayon asked Wrath not to interrupt the process, but Wrath, with a suspicious smile, expressed he would interrupt once. Rayon remarked that such a mistake would harm both of them, but Wrath didn't care. Wrath revealed his plan to strike when Rayon was most vulnerable and confident in his scheme. Rayon, undeterred, agreed to let Wrath try once. Wrath became cocky, flying around with blazing fire, scoffing at Rayon, saying he should live in fear. Rayon acknowledged Wrath as an enemy, realizing the Demon Lord would take over his body if given a chance. Despite thinking Wrath had stopped scheming, Rayon decided to stay alert. Exhausted, he sighed, focusing on more important things. Rayon walked to his room window, with Wrath questioning his intentions. Rayon confirmed he was doing it now, noting a woman visited there every night. They peered out the window and saw a maid by the riverside. Rayon said he would handle it. The maid, Judiel, was writing a report, noting Rayon's valuable training technique and unusual mana flow. She folded the paper and placed it on the river, but a blade pressed against her neck. A mysterious man threatened her, commanding her to look at the lake. Nervously, she obeyed, seeing her reflection and realizing the man was Rayon. He confronted her, saying he had felt her watching him since he returned. Judiel, startled, realized Rayon had been pretending not to know. Rayon threatened her again, making her open her mouth and shoving a mysterious ball down her throat. She gagged as Rayon stepped away, picking up the letter she had written. He couldn't see its contents, speculating it needed a special way to be visible. Rayon exclaimed the answer was moonlight, causing Judiel to despair. She questioned how Rayon knew, but he didn't answer. Instead, he narrated the names of Sieghart's family members, Alice, Daniel, and Karun, concluding that Karun was behind it. Judiel, shocked, thought it impossible for Rayon to know just from her face. She realized Rayon could read her thoughts and acknowledged the pain from the rage worm she had swallowed. Judiel felt waves of horror as we traveled back in time in a flashback event that took us back to when Karun commanded Judiel to infiltrate the annex and report every single detail about Sylvia and Rayon. Karun offered her a reward if she did well in this mission. He promised to make her wish come true, whatever it might be. Returning to the present, she confronted our hero and blatantly asked if he had fed her a rage worm. Rayon was taken aback to see that the maid knew about it, because that was not what he had expected. Judiel, however, had nothing she could do to reverse the effects now, but still, she immediately belched and gagged in an attempt to spit out the rage worm from her system but failed miserably. She explained it was the worst curse, letting others know the emotions of the person who ate it, and the owner could take the cursed individual's life by wishing for it. Judiel then acknowledged Rayon's reaction and concluded that he had fed her a rage worm. Rayon then stated that sending a letter like this to Karun must mean that she was a spy of the Intermediate Martial Hall, and guessed the plan started around the judgment ceremony. He read the letter she wrote, detailing information about him, Sylvia, Helen, and the other maids. Judiel cursed her past self for taking the mission, thinking it would be easy because of Sylvia's broken energy core. She realized Rayon was not a child but a monster. Desperate, she offered to change the letter's contents, but Rayon dismissed the idea, stating it would just show her incompetence. He ordered her to become a double spy, feeding others unimportant information while bringing him what he wanted. She agreed fearfully. Rayon left, telling her to have useful information next time. As he walked home, Wrath asked when he had summoned a rage worm. Rayon clarified he hadn't. He just fed her something causing extreme pain. Wrath was surprised Rayon gathered information without using a rage worm. Rayon explained there were many ways to gain information, and Wrath wondered if Judiel was right in calling him a monster. Rayon focused on training his aura. Soon, it was time to leave the annex for the training hall again. Judiel nervously accompanied Sylvia. Despite his efforts, Rayon couldn't perfect his aura. At the training hall, he saw only 42 trainees had passed the test. He recalled Rimmer saying only a quarter would remain. Renan approached him, and Rayon nervously responded to her thanks for his help with her training. Wrath questioned what was up with her, and Rayon didn't know either. Dorian appeared, out of breath, and started ranting about the hardships of being a provisional trainee. Rayon, annoyed, tuned him out. Dorian was glad Rayon was the top trainee, and was about to say something mean about Baan when Baan arrived. Byrne apologized for his behavior during the training hall tests and acknowledged his defeat in their duel. He vowed to work hard to surpass Rayon. Rayon was impressed by Baan's maturity, but Wrath was furious, wanting to poke out Baan's eye. Rayon calmed him down, saying it was impressive for a kid. Rimmer arrived, apologizing for being late due to drinking. He congratulated the trainees, but warned the real training began now, with new regimes added. As he spoke, a loud bang diverted their attention. A girl cursed at the gate, and Dorian recognized her in horror. Rimmer introduced her as Martha Sieghart, a failed trainee from last year. Martha glared at the students and asked who the top trainee was. Everyone turned to Rayon. Martha, hating those worse than her in higher positions, challenged Rayon to a fight. Rayon, skeptical but resigned to his fate, stepped forward and announced himself as the top trainee. Martha smirked, arrogantly questioning his worthiness and cracking her knuckles, ready for the duel. As the fight between Martha and Rayon was about to start, Bowen interrupted, criticizing Martha's behavior as undignified. Martha, offended, angrily questioned Bowen, threatening him to watch his words or face dire consequences. Bowen, however, argued that Rayon had demonstrated his skill as the top trainee in front of the patriarch and head instructor. Martha retorted, claiming that the one accusing her was also denying Rayon's skill. She defended her actions by saying that she needed to challenge Rayon. Buren, reflecting on his past, admitted he didn't want anyone else to feel as pathetic as he had, which Rayon noticed as a sign of change. Before the situation could escalate, Renan appeared between Rayon and Martha, asking her to leave. Martha, initially mocking their loyalty, decided to attack Rayon with lightning speed. Her attack, however, was easily dodged by Rayon, who then countered with a powerful punch that sent her sliding across the ground. Martha was stunned, unable to understand why her punch missed and how Rayon landed so effectively. As she looked up, she saw Rayon's fist charging toward her, which connected and knocked her away. Balan was surprised, and Rimmer observed with a calm smile. Martha, now speechless, was overwhelmed by her failure and let anger take over her. A dark aura surrounded her as she prepared to attack Rayon again, vowing he wouldn't be walking home that day. Just as things were about to get worse, the head instructor, Rimmer, intervened by grabbing Martha's fist. Martha, shocked, wondered when he had appeared. Rimmer, feeling underestimated despite not being as intimidating as other instructors, told Martha that Rayon had not yet started learning aura, making it unfair to fight him now. Annoyed, Martha brushed off Rimmer's intervention and said she would stop for now. Rimmer then told Rayon to return to his spot, and Martha walked away, frustrated. Wrath, observing the outcome, was furious and questioned Rayon's actions. He demanded that Martha be punished severely, even suggesting extreme measures. Rayon, however, remained calm and decided it was better to wait for a more strategic opportunity to gain something valuable from Martha. Wrath, though still angry, respected Rayon's decision and wondered about his plan. Rayon asked Wrath to wait for revenge later and followed the other students into the training hall. As the sun set, the students practiced their stances and lines. Rimmer announced a 10-minute break. Balan, taking a sip of water, reflected on his progress. He found the training regime challenging, especially the advanced principles of the third level. Comparing himself to Rayon, who had quickly mastered the training regime, Bun worried that Rayon would advance to swordsmanship training at the same time as him. Bun's attention shifted to Martha, who was training intensely without resting. Breathing heavily, Martha took a moment to reflect on her progress compared to Rayon's rapid improvement. She questioned how Rayon could advance so quickly despite his first time learning of fist techniques and his condition with the bitter cold curse. Martha, anxious and frustrated, gritted her teeth, determined not to fall behind. She recalled being labeled a horrible talent and always being the one chasing others since her adoption by the Sieghart family. Despite surpassing arrogant peers who boasted about their lineage, Martha felt her genius was being questioned. Her anxiety was overwhelming. Later, as Martha entered her annex, a servant greeted her and complimented her hard work. Martha, preoccupied, ignored him until he advised her not to feel rushed. Surprised, she stopped and asked him why. The servant mentioned that while Rayon had been impressive lately, he would never surpass her. Intrigued, Martha asked why he thought so. The servant revealed that Rayon had a critical weakness that he could never overcome.